All right, let's go ahead and well, let's get started. I think we'll have quite a few people joining us here over the next few minutes, so we'll get started and do kind of an introduction, tell you a little bit about uh, who we are and a little bit more about the topic for tonight, which is guaranteed returns of 10 to 25% or more. Really what we're talking about tonight, and what we'll hear quite a bit about are tax liens, how tax lien certificates work. But first, the one thing you've always got to wonder when you come onto some kind of a free webinar is what's the catch? Nothing in life is really free. It kind of goes right along with, I think, an introduction as far as who we are. My name is Ferre. Stephen Swenson will be joining us here in a moment. We are the founders of a company called Tax Solutions. Basically, we started with tax liens and tax deeds probably 15 years ago. We're actually cousins, and we've kind of grown up with each other. Now we're also business partners. To make a long story short, for the last 7 years, we've been providing tax lien and tax deed training to some of the biggest seminar companies in the country. They would travel around doing these huge financial seminars, and they would sell the training that we would provide. They would sell it for thousands of dollars. And, we have always enjoyed doing the training side of it. One thing you'll find about me and Steve is that we're not professional sales guys. We're really more into the teaching side of it. We're more into the investment side of it than we really are um, into the sales side of it. And so we typically just try to basically tell you what's available if you're interested, and then kind of move on to the training. But the bottom line on what we've done is we basically stopped working with seminar companies. We cut out the middleman, and it's enabled us to drop the price of the training by about 90%, which sounds a little bit crazy, but that's legitimately what we've been able to do. When seminar companies put on seminars, it costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of money tied up in putting on the event. It's really just become so expensive, I think, for them to try to do it, that it hardly makes sense. And the one thing we always understood about it was that we could teach people for a lot less. It wasn't like that money was going to us. We've been teaching people for a lot less for a long time, and so it just made sense. And so essentially, if anybody's interested in the training, I'll send you a link. I'll put a link in the question or the comments section there. A link you can click on. That'll take you to a page that has the offer. The offer is $250. Literally, it's about 90% off. I mean, the programs have sold always for 2,000 to 4,000, so $3,000. We're basically about we cut that off by quite a bit. So this is what we enjoy doing, and we can provide the training for a lot less. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Also, the training normally is like a 3-month package, but for people that have joined here recently, I've been doubling that to 6 months. So essentially, it's really all the training you'll probably need for a really low price. So anyhow, I'll provide that link later if anybody's interested. Back on to our topic of tax liens and tax deeds, and just the overall return, guaranteed returns of 10 to 25% or more. That's a pretty bold statement. And really, I think that we'll talk about the guaranteed side of it, exactly what part of it's guaranteed. And as far as the interest rates, one thing you'll find with Steve and I is that we don't fluff things up. We really just like to stick to the facts. And what's interesting about tax liens is that the facts are good enough. You don't have to embellish or say things that aren't true about tax liens when you're trying to build them up, because just the reality, is plenty good. So let's talk about exactly how they work. What exactly are we talking about ultimately? You'll hear us use terms sometimes like tax liens, tax deeds. tax foreclosures. Ultimately, what we're talking about are tax sales in general. By the way, Steve Swenson is with me now, and so he'll jump in and out at different points here in the conversation. Interestingly enough, if we're talking about property taxes, our current tax system's roots really date back to the early 1800s. It was interesting. I was reading a little bit about it, and by the time the Revolutionary War happened, the colonies already had good taxation systems already in place. Otherwise, the Revolutionary War would have been possible. But after that, the state laws that we know today, the state constitutions, were essentially set up, and each state has a constitution with provisions for taxation. That's one of the important things that are covered in state law. It's one of those rights that the state grants, and they do that based on property. That's been an easy thing to tax for a long time, and the term ad valorem, if you ever heard that, simply means to tax the property based on its value. So essentially, everybody's taxed in a fair way. So essentially, every state's property tax system has an enforcement method that's in place. To simplify, really, teaching, which is kind of interesting. When Steve and I started with this, really, there's never been anything in place. There's not a uniform teaching system or even a uniform anything when it comes to taxes, property taxes, because you've got 50 different states and you've got 50 different sets of state laws. And so it's always been confusing for people to try to grasp it and wrap their head around. To simplify that, we basically broke it down into 3 categories. So we're talking about the first category of tax liens, second category of tax deeds, or you could refer to them as tax foreclosures if it makes it easier for you. And the third one would be redemption deeds. What we're going to be talking about specifically today are tax liens. So we're talking about the states that are in blue, which really, what's interesting about the internet today is that I can show you the maps, the states on a map, but with the internet today, basically all of these states are within reach. That's the one thing that's changed. It's really leveled the playing ground. So, if we're talking about this enforcement system, tax liens, which are used in you saw the states in blue. What happens is the county essentially places a tax lien against a property when the taxes become delinquent. Now, there are a number of things that happen when that lien is placed. The lien itself is a form of security. It's actually a form of security interest granted over an item to secure the payment of a debt. The lien does a couple of things. It prevents the transfer of ownership. That's an important one. So you can't sell the property while a lien is placed against it. And it can lead to foreclosure rights after a redemption period is passed. Now, the county has to pay for a lot of things. A lot of things we don't realize or we don't think about very often, but the county's paying for public education. They're paying for law enforcement, emergency services, utility companies. I mean, there's a lot of things that kind of fall onto the county to provide. So the county has regular bills coming out, and they really rely on the property taxes to come in. Also, if they don't collect the money that they need and they've got outgoing bills, ultimately they have to make those bills one way or another. So if people don't pay, if they're missing enough money, then they'll have to essentially borrow it. So really, the tax lien system is about enforcement, but ultimately what it's really about, though, is it's really about the county collecting money. That's an important thing to remember, is whenever you're dealing with local governments, the whole purpose and everything they do is just to collect money. You gonna speak up here? You're silent. The idea here is that is to reiterate a couple things. What happens there is suddenly, once that lien's placed, you can't sell the property. The lien is going to lead to foreclosure after that redemption period has expired. Now, the purpose of creating that lien, like I said again, is to collect money. So this is accomplished through the tax sale. The idea is the county has created a lien that it can now sell. So it's going to sell the liens to investors. Why do investors buy them? Well, when you buy a lien, you're basically the amount you pay for is the amount that for 1 year's worth of taxes plus penalties and fees. But that lien is set up to pay out an interest rate return, and it has to be an attractive interest rate return because the county has to attract investors to come and buy it. So in state law, for all of these states that utilize liens, they have an interest rate that ranges. And so when we talk about the 10 to 25% or more, what we're really talking about is the different percentages that states will allow investors to make. And that amount is really pretty high. I mean, well, 10 to 25%. A lot of states have 18%, 20% in some states, 24%. So we're using 18% as an example here. And when we're talking about that on an annual basis, we're talking about accruing at a rate of 1.5% per month. So investors essentially give county the money to buy these liens because they're going to pay out an interest rate return. And in this case, we could say it's the state's maximum interest rate you can earn is 18%, but that's also sort of the default. I'll show you what I mean.
Really one of the great things about tax lien investing is, we've seen tax liens at $10 up to, $500,000 plus. And so with tax lien investing, regardless of where you're at, we've seen single family homes, and they may not be $100,000 single family home, but a single family home that may be worth $30,000 or $40,000 with a tax lien that may be $200 or $300 or $400. And so, there's different types of tax liens at all different levels. And there's tax liens that you can purchase on commercial properties that the properties are worth $1 million plus. So you may be investing a $20 or $30 in just one tax lien. But if that's what you're looking to do and you're earning a good interest rate, well, you might be earning, a 17% interest rate on that tax lien.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point as far as the amounts, because essentially you don't have to be scared. For people that are nervous about investments, it's not like you have a huge commitment. You can buy smaller liens if you want when you're doing a feeling for it.
Yeah, my first tax lien was a $160 tax lien on a building lot in Wyoming.
Yeah, I think the first lien I bought was for $67. So the amount in the beginning, you can go through the process to see how it works, but it works its way up. And essentially, well, with property taxes, we know that the more you pay in property taxes, essentially it's based on your property value. So the more valuable your property is, the more you pay. So it goes to say that with tax liens, generally, the higher the amount, the more valuable the property. As long as you're looking at a single year's worth of taxes versus a single year's worth of taxes on a property. So if you're comparing apples to apples and looking at property value, then it should work out that way. So you can get an idea of what you're looking for based on the amount of the lien, which is kind of an interesting thing to know. Now, on the day of the sale, let's just take note that two things happen. Number one is the lien begins accruing interest. Okay, and number two is the redemption period begins. Now, the redemption period is also something that's set by the state. So if it's 2 years or it could be 3 years, they vary. It ranges from 6 months to 4 years, depending on which state you're looking at. Now, really, after the sale, a very simple way to put it is that there are only two possible outcomes. And they both depend on what the property owner, with the delinquent taxes, is going to do. I mean, are they going to pay their taxes off, including their fees, or are they not going to pay it off? And the outcome is really dependent upon them. If they pay it off, which the majority of people do at some point, then you end up getting a check in the mail for your initial investment plus the interest rate that you would have earned up to that point. If they don't pay it off and that redemption period ends, then the lien gives you foreclosure rights. So, you can foreclose on the property, or in some cases, the county forecloses on the property. So, basically, just to kind of outline that, if the property owner pays, which, if you think about this, having delinquent property taxes is not unusual. It's something that happens to lots of people. It's not uncommon. So at some point, most people end up paying their property taxes back. Also, the more valuable the property is, the more likely it is that you're going to pay it back. Why? Well, because nobody wants to lose money. And the more valuable it is, the more money, is on the line, could be lost. So, somebody can step in and pay that off at any point. If there's a lender or somebody like that that's involved, then they may not even know that taxes are delinquent. But if foreclosure's filed, then they're going to find out at that point because they should receive a foreclosure notice.
And really, depending on what your investment strategy is, there's really a lot of different options when it comes to purchasing tax lien certificates. Let's say you have $10,000 to invest, you may choose to purchase 10 different tax liens where you're earning, interest rate on those 10 different tax liens, or you may prefer just to purchase one tax lien. As long as the property value is there, and that's really what's key. When you're going through and looking at tax liens, that tax lien opening bid amount will usually be a reflection of value, of the assessed value or the property's value. So a $100 tax lien obviously probably doesn't have a real expensive property on it. It may have a property that's worth $1,000 or $2,000. Now it's possible when you get up into the $300-400 tax liens where you might have a little bit more valuable property, and also sometimes people will pay part of their property taxes, but not all of them. And so maybe they paid, the first 6 months, but they didn't pay the last 6 months, or they paid the last 6 months, but they didn't pay the first 6 months. What's going to happen is there's still going to be a tax lien issued on that property. Just because they paid half of the property or part of the property taxes, if it's not paid in full, then there'll be a tax lien issued. And so in that situation, you're purchasing a tax lien for really even less than, for just a portion of the tax lien. Of the tax lien amount.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. The majority of tax liens end up redeeming, but not all of them. It's interesting. The lender may not know anything about it until that foreclosure notice is filed, and then maybe they'll get involved. But at the same time, foreclosure is foreclosure, especially when we're talking about the county and the foreclosure process that they're going through with this property. It doesn't matter who the owner is, whether it's a lender or whether it's, if the property taxes are paid, the property will be foreclosed on. So it really is a strong, I think it gives people a strong motivation there to pay their property taxes. And they'll essentially lose it if they don't. That's really where the security of tax liens is found.
And we know, especially recently, over the last couple of years, there is good properties that will, eventually go to the certificate holder, and we can see that just in evidence in the tax deed states. The good properties that come available in those states, those have to go through the process of eventually getting foreclosed on without the property owner, and it can take a tax deed state just as long, sometimes even longer, than a tax lien state. In Florida, for example, you can foreclose in 2 years. In Arizona, you can foreclose in 3 years. But here in Utah or Idaho, in a tax deed situation, it's going to take 5 years. So, I guess that was my point.
Well, I think all of it is pretty interesting when you start to look at how exactly they work, the mechanics of them. So what is it that makes it guaranteed? Well, a couple of things here first. The interest rate is something that is set up in state law. So when it's this, if it seems like this high interest rate, it's what the state set up, and it's to attract investors. So The system is really set up to work. And when I talk about it working, what I mean is somebody coming in and eventually paying off their taxes and everything redeeming. That's sort of the way that the county designed the system, is for redemption to happen, but without foreclosure on the line, there wouldn't be really any risk. So what is it exactly that makes it a guaranteed investment? Well, first off, it's not guaranteed in a sense that if a person doesn't know what they're doing, could they lose money? Absolutely. Um, it, I guess as we've talked about here, I mean, the value of the lien, a lien's only as valuable as the property that it's been placed against. So if you think about it, if we're looking at a couple of different properties here, look at it from the perspective of the property owner and their desire to keep the property. All right. So, with both of these property owners, obviously one is going to have far more desire to keep their property no matter what than the other. And you could say that's based on a number of things. You could say that it's based on the property's use. The property, one property has the ability to be used for a lot of things. The other property, has one use. But also, other things to consider are the amount, of the taxes, because just because something's raw land doesn't mean that it's not, doesn't mean that somebody doesn't want it.
It doesn't mean that it's not valuable.
Yeah.
Some raw land could have, quite a bit more value. You find a couple acre commercial lot, it's going to have a lot more value, or may have a lot more value than your single family home at the tax sale.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But if you think about these two properties, the risk that lies in tax liens is in this. Tax liens placed against useless land. Okay, so if we're talking about useless land, we would say that that's first off a piece of property with a low value and no apparent use. But also, if you think about it, a property is really only worth what somebody's willing to buy it for, and so. That doesn't change the fact that the county still has to place a value on every single piece of real estate. That's the only way they can tax it. So, you've got that difference there between what the real world, what somebody's willing to pay for a property, and what the county has to place a value on. What you end up with are a lot of pieces of property that maybe people don't have a high desire to keep. Okay, in other words, imagine the property owner for the property on the left. If the county said this property is worth $5,000, maybe this person's property tax bill, every year, maybe it adds up, and maybe it's to the point where, they want, maybe it's a $300 tax bill, and this guy just doesn't care enough about the property to pay it, so he ignores it. Well, there's a problem if you're the investor and you decide to buy a lien against that property. And the problem is that the property owner may know about the property taxes, and they may have made the conscious choice to not pay the property taxes because they don't want it. The problem that you run into as an investor is, if you buy the lien against that, is first off, that property is not going to redeem, so you're going to end up needing to wait out that redemption period, and at the end of that, you could foreclose on the property, but what's the point of foreclosing on a property unless you can sell it, or unless you can do something to make money with it? Otherwise, you just kind of make yourself, the property owner, and then you're responsible for the bill, for the property tax bill on it.
We've been involved in tax lien and deed investing for over 10 years now, and we've attended sales, probably worked with hundreds of students, and seen hundreds of deals. And throughout that time, the only time I've ever seen anyone lose money is people that are completely uneducated, don't do any research whatsoever, and attend an auction without even looking at the property, understanding the tax sale system. If you get yourself educated, then let's kind of compare tax lien investing to the stock market. The difference is, in the stock market, who knows what the interest rate is going to be, but here in the tax lien market, it's guaranteed. And you have a list of all the stocks that are available, And all you have to do is find out which of the stocks are good, and the answers are right there just by looking at the property record. And so you really have a key or the ability to go through and look at that and find the very best properties, the very best stocks that are going to be guaranteed at the interest rate return.
I keep saying stocks.
Well, I'm comparing it to a stock.
Okay, all right, sorry, you're confusing me a little bit. Okay, so in other words,
if you were to compare a tax lien to the stock market, except for the difference is, well, no.
No, I messed it all up.
Yeah,
I messed it all up here pretty good. Essentially, I think if we were to compare it, really, I mean, let's just think about everybody in retirement. Because really everybody is going to have to retire here at some point. And in the past, what have people done? They've turned over their retirement to somebody else. Basically they're a part of some type of a fund, whatever it is. They really don't have to be all that actively involved in their retirement, but that's sort of changing because people are losing money, or the returns they're getting are not really that good. Certainly not the kinds of returns they need to be getting if they're going to build their retirement into something substantial. And so I think a lot of people want to get out of that. They want to get out of the unpredictable market. They want something that is more predictable. Which I think is something like you mentioned. With the stock market, you never necessarily know what your rate of return is going to be, but with this, you will know exactly what rate of return you're going to earn on the property. And what's best about it is that you're either going to make that return or you're going to get the chance to foreclose on that property. That's really the beauty of the investment. In fact, if you wanted the best way to make this a good a guaranteed investment, basically, it's to choose tax liens that are placed against nice properties. Properties like single family homes. If it's a property like that has a lot of value, then almost always somebody's going to step in and pay it off. But if they didn't, it would be a complete home run, to be able to foreclose on that property. And like Steve mentioned before too, we've actually seen a lot of sales lately where properties, like for instance, Florida is probably one of the biggest states for a lot of these sales because they've really done a good job of creating markets that are easy for people to participate in. We've seen lots and lots of these properties go to the tax lien certificate holder, meaning the certificate holder ends up foreclosing on it. And sometimes I saw an example last week of a property that ended up going to the certificate holder for $12,000, and the property was worth like $120,000, $130,000. It was a single family home, and that's insane because what that means is that bidders actually got a chance to bid on that property, and it didn't even get a minimum bid of $12,000, and so it ended up going to the certificate holder. Florida's a little bit different, but it's amazing the opportunities that are out there. But really, that's kind of how tax liens work. I think if we were to...
And kind of my point of comparing it to the stock market was, unlike the stock market, you don't know what stocks are going to perform. With the tax lien certificate list, you can go through and review that list, and you know which properties are good. Unlike the stock market, you can maybe hope they're going to be good, but with tax liens and deeds, all you need to do is avoid the bad tax liens, the ones that have very little value, that are like Shade showed us the two different comparables. Then you're not going to make those type of mistakes, and if that's the reason it's such a safe investment, is that you're guaranteed by real estate. You're also guaranteed by state law, and you're guaranteed an interest rate return. So it's not, there's no guesswork. What am I going to earn? When you purchase the tax lien, you know what you're going to earn.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. If an individual, normally if you wanted to get involved with different types of investments, you feel like you have to be a complete expert and know, things. How would you know how to choose, stocks, or how to choose, how to choose different types of investments? The majority of the world, they go into that feeling fairly out of place. It doesn't feel comfortable to them. They never really feel like experts in it. This is something that's pretty simple that you really can be an expert in because the list is right there and the property records are right there, and all you really have to do is just learn how to read them. And so once you're able to look at it and you know what the property is, then you know how safe it is. Because think about it, how safe is a $1,000 investment on on a $50,000 house or a $100,000 house. Well, that $1,000 investment is secured by the entire property. So basically, what you're saying is that $1,000 is secured by a $50,000 property. Of course, it's safe. You know, it's incredibly safe. And whether you get the interest rate return or whether you get the property, it's a good investment.
And if you were to look at a tax lien that was $1,000 and the property was worth $3,000, and it looked to be a very small piece of land, well, that's a tax lien that you're going to avoid because there isn't any value in it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what makes tax lien investing fun. But also, even though it seems confusing, once you understand how to do it, it's really pretty simple.
Yeah, it actually is. In fact, it's incredibly simple. And we've looked for different ways to simplify it as much as we can because we've taught it for a long time, and so over that time we've basically just tried to create the probably the simplest system that we could come up with. There are 3 different ways you can buy tax liens. You can buy them through live auctions. In other words, like on-site auctions. I'm sure everybody's seen a live auction before. The second way is through an online auction, and the third is a system called over-the-counter, OTC. It basically means anything that was offered at a sale at one point but didn't sell. So all the leftover stuff, the county will oftentimes put that just back on the books and offer it to the public. So you can buy those directly from the county, just by making payment arrangements with them. Now, another unique advantage of the over-the-counter tax liens is that when you buy them, because you're buying them after the sale and there's nobody to directly compete with, you're automatically going to earn the maximum interest rate return that is allowed in the state. That's what I meant earlier when I said that it's also, in a way, the default interest rate, is because if there's no competition, then you automatically earn, the state's maximum interest rate. So that's a unique advantage of over-the-counter investing. But also what's interesting about over-the-counter investing is that redemption period, when we talked about how that redemption period started on the day of the sale, well, it actually begins on the day of the sale, whether the tax lien sells or not. So if the tax lien doesn't sell and it goes back on the books, that redemption period is still ticking away from the date the auction was held. So you can buy liens that are already deep into their redemption period or are even coming up or basically finished with the redemption period, so you can start the foreclosure process almost immediately.
And really, depending on what your investment strategy in it is, and as you get more advanced, as you learn more about tax lien investing, you can look at different tax liens and based on your investment, determine what it's more likely to do or what's the chances. For example, let's say that you really wanted to acquire property. Now, usually we just recommend you going and purchasing tax deeds, but let's say you'd like to do it through tax liens. Well, a property that's owner-occupied versus a property that's maybe vacant or owned by a different company or owned by somebody who doesn't live there, there's different things you can look for as you go through and research the county records that'll give you clues about the property. Now, chances are the property will probably pay off. The property owner will probably pay off. But if not, I guess what I'm saying is that as a property owner who's living in the property is more likely to pay that off than a property owner who maybe that's grandma's home and, they live in a different state and they're trying to, handle life right now.
Yeah. Like, for instance, there are signs that you can look for. Like having an out-of-state owner is always a sign that a property would be more likely to foreclose than if the owner, if it's an owner occupied, which you could tell by the mailing address for the county, for any county information. The mailing address for the owner, if it's the same property address and mailing address, then you know that it's owner occupied. Now, we actually want to show some examples. We want to get to get it before we can just do some live stuff. But I wanted to show everybody just how simple that getting something like an 18% return, really is, because 18% in the real world is a difficult interest rate to earn. 18% with tax liens is simple, and the way you can get it guaranteed, if you want, is by buying something over the counter. Then you've got a guaranteed rate. It's just a matter of picking a good property. What I'm going to show everybody here is what we would do. We're going to take a look here at some over-the-counter properties. We typically we'd start off at the student website. This is propertytaxlist.com. This is our student website that we basically use for training and also to provide all the tax sale lists and stuff to students. Now, starting from there, if we were to go to the online auction section, we've got different links here we can click on, and also a lot of lists we can click on. But there are different online auction companies that are hosting a lot of online auctions for counties. Oddly enough, the majority of tax sales that take place in the U.S. are still live auctions. They still just have live sales. Counties are notoriously bad at advertising their sales. And
there's certain states that have caught on big time.
Yeah.
For example, like Florida probably has about 80% of their tax lien auctions online, and probably has about 10% of their tax deed auctions online. So some states, will have lots of options, while other states will have no option whatsoever.
Yeah, that's true. Now, one thing that's confusing about dealing with different counties is that the terms and references that they use, that the different what they call things. It might be just unique to that county. It might be something statewide, but it's never something that goes from county to county. There's rarely anything is there. Anything's really uniform. So you have to learn how to decipher language to figure out what the similarities are, because really it all comes down to the fact that there really are just three basic systems that counties use. County held is another way, is basically their way of saying over the counter. Any of the liens are left over. From clicking on that link, we can get over here to this Grant Street group. They have they have tax lien sales they hold, but something they're doing now is also offering the tax liens over the counter, which makes it really easy to buy. I mean, it's super easy. Like, basically, you just have to make payment arrangements online, and you can pay for them. So when you click on one of these counties, what happens is it comes up to a page that looks like this. This is sort of their home page for their little over-the-counter sale. But if you click on the view or purchase certificates, you're going to get a list that's going to come up like this. And the list will have all of their over-the-counter liens, but it also has a lot of additional information as well, that you can look at. You can also change the amounts based on the lien amount, which I think I show in this picture. So if we wanted to figure out what amounts, you could organize those according to amount to look at some of the higher or lower priced liens. But from there, you can start the process of doing some of the research on the properties by clicking on that link, and that's essentially where we're gonna stop the slide side of it here, kind of switch over, and go to the live trading here. Okay, and by the way, we welcome questions at any time, so please do ask us questions. You are welcome to ask in the chat section or in the question section. I think what we're going to do here, we're going to start off and just show some live examples of different tax lien areas and different things that you can do having to do with the investment. Some different examples would really be the best. Make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so let's go actually back to what we were showing on some of the slides there. Let's just take a look at that for a second, because that'll be easy to do. Okay, so All right, what I'm doing here, we're looking here at this is the beginning of the list for the counties that are that have over-the-counter tax liens, that are available, and we've got quite a few counties that are here. And also, they have payment options that are pretty simple. I mean, they you can pay with like a credit card or a checking account, to do wire transfers. They're pretty flexible, which is something that's really changed. It's interesting, but when Steve and I started with this, as I was thinking about it, it was probably 2001, probably, when you were starting it.
I attended my first tax sale in '99, but really kind of got started in 2000.
Yeah, so it's probably been 15 years now. But in the beginning, it was so much different back then. It is crazy to us to have witnessed just the change and the difference, and really what's happened over the last 15 years is all about the internet and how it's changed counties. Counties are somewhat slow to change, so they didn't really they were a little slow to get on the online thing, but slowly they all got there, and it sort of changed everything. Essentially, really, the main part that changed were the county records. The online records. The online record systems absolutely changed how due diligence, how you could research properties. Because before that, you had to be in a county records building if you wanted to look at county records.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, I just was thinking, my first coaching student, I'm not trying to think, is it 2002, 2003, sometime around there, I probably started coaching. And my first student was an investor from California, and he wanted to purchase tax lien certificates, and he wanted to purchase them over the counter because the tax sale in Arizona wasn't going to happen until February, and this was maybe 8 or 10 months before that. And so for him to be able to purchase tax liens, we ended up setting up a time for him to go out to the actual, drive out to the county, spend 2 days in the county courthouse going through county records and researching each one of the tax liens in the county records one by one to determine which tax liens are good. While I'm talking to him on the phone here in Utah, and he eventually bought 6 tax liens over the counter. We were able to find 6 good ones, but that was the process. There wasn't didn't even think about going to the county records and typing in a parcel number and looking up the property records, or even getting the list. Getting a list was a process of sending them $15 and waiting 3 weeks to get the list back. And so, just so much has changed since I first even started. That was one of my very first students that I started coaching, the first success story, or the first student that I had to actually purchase something. And you look at the process that he went through, a 3-day trip, 2 nights in a hotel, 16, 20 hours at the county courthouse, and it was successful, and it was a great experience. But you could do that if you knew what you were doing. That you could do that in an hour.
Yeah, really, that is about the way it works. You can do the same thing in about an hour now that would have required days of work, back then. And since then, what's interesting about it as well is that tax liens and tax deeds have always been misunderstood by the general public, or even by investors that are pretty savvy with most things. The fact is, rarely ever do we talk to somebody that actually knows what they're talking about with tax sales. I can count the number of times that I've talked to people that actually understood tax sales, before they went through our training, on one hand.
Yeah.
And that is, that's kind of a crazy thing to say, but it's because of the lack of uniformity. It's because there isn't anything out there that somebody can sort of grasp onto. And most of what they were hearing were just sales pitches in the past about, get homes for pennies on the dollar. And it was all about, the sales side of it, and a bunch of fluff, and not a whole lot about just good training. teaching to actually show somebody how to do it. I mean, that was initially what caused us to create a training program. Was that I think we tried one of these training programs, that was supposed to be like a good training program, certainly an expensive training program, and it just taught absolutely nothing. And we just thought, this is ridiculous. We understand this better than this training program does. I mean, at that point, we just started attending auctions. That was really the best way to learn. So we just started attending auctions and basically learned that way.
But eventually, as we started coaching and teaching students, we started learning other areas in other states because we were helping the student go through the process in Louisiana or Georgia or Kentucky or whatever. And so eventually, we got a grasp, even though, may have never attended a Kentucky tax sale, understand the process pretty well because we've helped several students or individuals purchase properties in different areas or purchase tax lien certificates or deeds.
All over the years, we've worked with people in probably every state, and people outside of the U.S. What I went into here is the over-the-counter sale for Citrus County, Florida, and this little online auction site that they've set up, which is definitely the easiest way that I've seen so far. You can change, or you can look at the liens based on the amount. So we can look at some of these liens. We're going to look at some of the higher dollar liens here, but you saw some there that were as low as $30. So let me just enlarge this a little bit so you can see. Okay, so what we've got here. See the way the list is set up. The information that it gives us is, we've got tax year, the issue date, certificate number, account, and the purchase amount. And then we've got a column over here on the left that gives us some pretty neat information and valuable information. It tells us the number of certificates that have been issued against a property, the number of certificates that are redeemed, and what's outstanding. Now, that might be a little bit confusing to some people. If we talk about multiple liens placed against a property. Well, when somebody hasn't paid their property taxes and a lien's issued against their property, it really increases the chances. I mean, there's a very high chance that there will be another lien issued against the property, the following year. It could redeem, but if it doesn't redeem, then they're going to end up issuing a lien against it.
Go ahead and click up there at the tax year.
Yeah.
Just right up there at the top. If you click on the tax year, click it again. So it goes the other way. So as of now, it looks like they haven't downloaded the brand new lists from this month. I mean, because they just had their tax sale. It probably ended on the 31st.
Oh, yeah.
So, within the next week to 3 weeks, the counties are going to be downloading the brand new tax lien certificates. And that is always the best time to purchase tax liens. And so all the Florida counties are going to be doing that. Of course, we're going to be getting on the list and making them available on property tax list.
Yeah, that is interesting to note, though, that they haven't.
Otherwise, we'd have the 2000.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and the date that they had issued that last one was on June 1st. And so they're past due. They'll probably put them on the website anytime, and that is definitely the best time to pick them out.
Because any tax lien that's been overlooked is going to be picked up within the first couple of weeks. At least the best ones.
Yeah. So we've got different lien amounts that we can look at, or different liens here. Here's a lien for $1,366. We can click on this one. It says it was issued on June 1st of 2013, so it was issued at the last after the last sale. And let's see here. We can see with this property, so it has a $1,300 lien, and we can see a few things. This is a portion of a county property record here, sort of an overview of the property. So let me just zoom in a little bit so that people can sort of see what this is. Okay. Now you can see it gives us a certificate number here. What's interesting, when we talk about that guaranteed into 18, the guaranteed interest rate. One of the things you can see is, right here, we've got the interest rate, and because it's over the counter, it's automatically at the state's maximum, which in Florida is 18%. So you make 18% on the lien. You're either going to make 18% on the lien, or you're going to foreclose on the property. So it's important to always look and see what the property is, because there's always that chance that you may need to foreclose on it. A couple of things that we can see about this right off the bat is that it doesn't give us a known property address, so that tells us that it's probably some form of land. But
and that's probably the reason it hasn't been purchased.
Mm-hmm.
Because it looks like it has a decent assessed value, but when you look at that unknown property address and the only thing you have is the legal description, if you really do some research on it, we need to check some maps and find out really what the property is.
Well, you can actually kind of tell from the legal description what it is on this one.
Yeah, you can see it's 1.5 acres.
Well, it's a strip. It's basically a 100-foot strip of roadbed next to the railroad. So in other words, picture a railroad and like a 100-foot strip of land that runs next to it, and that's essentially what I think that it is. But they're valuing it at $72,000. This wouldn't be our first choice here for a lien.
No, in fact, I'd probably advise against purchasing this one.
Yeah.
Because who knows how really even though the county has a high assessed value, you don't always want to judge just the assessed value. You want to look at the property.
Yeah, and you can also tell here, the certificates issued and the certificates outstanding. There's 7 certificates issued, and they're all outstanding. It hasn't really had anything redeemed, so it may not have a property owner that really cares much about it. That's the one catch with over-the-counter stuff, is that because you're dealing with things that didn't sell at auction, with the leftovers. Well, there's different reasons why properties can end up being left over after they sell. It could be because it's a junk property and nobody wanted to buy it. That's always a possibility. But it can also be because the county has humongous sale. They've got lots and lots of properties and very few bidders, that are showing up to buy them. Or, it could be that something falls through with transaction. I mean, there could be lots of reasons. But the main point is that a lot of the normal tax liens, the tax liens against, the single-family homes are going to get bought. A lot of them will get bought at the auction, but some of them won't. But you're going to get more raw land, included after the sale, that doesn't get purchased. So you're going to have to dig through more properties in order to find the right ones when you're looking at over-the-counter stuff. With the liens, and I guess another way to look at this too is if you were going to pay $1,300 for a tax lien, would you rather pay $1,300 for a tax lien against a home, or or would you like rather pay $1,300 in tax lien against a strip of roadbed?
Since we're talking about tax and certificates, why don't we spend the last few minutes and look at some the online auctions that are happening in New Jersey if we go to real auction.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
At least I think that there's probably some auctions going on. I'm pretty sure there is. They may not have started, but I think the signs are open.
If the lien sales?
Yeah.
So let's see. This is another one of the companies that is hosting some of the online auctions right now for Florida.
Let's see. Let's click on Maryland and see if that's still open first. So what we'll do is we'll click on Preview Items for Sale, and we can see the face amount, the assessed value, and also over on the left-hand side we have the sequence number.
Oh, those are some. Oh, face amount. There we go. So I think that's working its way down now, right?
Yeah. Also, as we're looking here, we can see certain properties that have a single-family home or a home next to it.
Which you can see.
That's
right
going to be a homestead property. That doesn't mean that if a property doesn't have a home, doesn't mean that it's not a structure. It just means that it's not somebody's single-family home.
Yeah.
So if we're looking for primarily interest rate returns, we don't want to mess with anything. Well, looking at a $14,000 tax lien that's somebody's homestead property that's worth $1.1 million. That $14,000 is against a property that's 1.1.
Yeah, it's got a ton of value, and the investment would be very secure. So I mean, imagine if you were let's say you're investing retirement funds, okay, and you don't want to buy up tons and tons of of small tax liens for $1,000, if you can get these done at $15,000 at a time, that's all that much easier. And the idea is that you invest, your funds, and then you reinvest as they redeem.
So we're looking at this property here, and we can see some information right off, right as we look at it. We can see, first of all, the year it was built was in 2000. We can also see that it's on 160 acres. So this is probably it's obviously on a huge piece of land. We can also see the living square feet is 6,100 square feet. And so it's got to be a pretty big home. And it also has a very high value when we look over at the valuation. We've got an assessed value of 1.1. It's got a building value of $891,000. So we know that in a land value of $225. So even though it has 160 acres, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the value is in the land. That means that this property must have quite a bit of value. In fact, about 3 times the value that the land does.
Yeah, let's take a look, just because we're interested in, with the $15,000 lien, why not? It would be worth the time. Let's take a look and see what it is. So I'm just going to jump over here. We're just going to use Google Maps. Is really about the best mapping program, or at least the most convenient one right now. So I copied that address portion of it here, and that is it right there. Oh, it's too bad they're not going to have a street side image of it.
Let's see if we can get a satellite.
Oh, this is it right there.
Whoa.
Yeah, no wonder it's $1 million property. It's it is.
Look, is that a home with stable?
It's an equestrian. It's an equestrian.
Yeah.
It's an equestrian property.
And there's a single family home right there.
It's got a bunch of them.
Right there, and then barns. That's a huge barn, stables.
Yeah, that is that's quite the property. When you look at it, I mean, it's they've got a lot of land there. It looks like beautiful land, and it's all complete. I mean, you can see.
Got riding areas, stables.
Yeah, that's pretty neat property.
Really nice. There's a single family home right there.
Yeah, so the question.
Got a hot tub too.
The question to ask yourself, when you're looking at these, at these potential investments, with lien is first off, how motivated is the property owner to keep this property in comparison to the amount of the lien. So your $13,000 lien, well, what are the chances the property owner is going to let this property go because of a $13,000 tax lien? Slim to none. And so that really means the property's the lien is almost pretty much guaranteed to redeem. But if it didn't, then you would start the foreclosure process, and then somebody would pay. But if they didn't, then you would foreclose. Although it's hard to imagine foreclosing on
such a big property. I mean, look how big that barn is.
Yeah.
Go back and look at that other one. Because I mean, look at the house
Mm-hmm.
compared to that barn, even the car.
Yeah, it's a really big equestrian facility. Is what it looks like.
All the fenced
Yeah,
It's a nice property.
Yeah, it's very amazing. It's an amazing property. Well, I think with that, we pretty much run out of time, and we want to keep the webinar down to about an hour here because we're recording, and we'll make this this replay available for anybody if you're interested in watching it again. I put a link to the website and the offer there in the question and the question section, the chat section. You can also contact us on our telephone here. You can reach us on the hotline. I'll put it down here. The hotline number is 801-331-8921. There we go. That's the hotline number. Normally operates from 9 to 5 Mountain Time. You can also reach us on email. My email is, let me just get that right before we finish off here. All right, and that's the email address. So those are the three things you might need to contact us. We appreciate everybody coming out, joining us for the webinar tonight. And yeah, definitely, if you are interested in tax liens and you want to get started, I guarantee that this is the cheapest and most efficient training that you'll find. We love to do it. We like working with the students. So. Yeah, if you're interested, click on the offer and we'll get you signed up. You can also join us, I'm sure, for the next free training that we'll do, or even on Secrets of Tax Investing. There's still free material on there if you haven't been on there for a little bit.
Look at that road goes right through the building.
I don't think it's building right there.
No, it's not.
No, I don't think so.
Oh.
Anyhow, hey, thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We'll call it a night here. Thanks so much.